Nations. And Julie is from the Mi'kmaq First Nation in a very small province in Canada where there's 2 First Nation people there. And Lydia is going to, in the talk, take a deep dive just into Julie and her whole world. So, yeah, be prepared to be open to a brand new First Nations world in life. And here they are, Lydia and Julie.
Thank you. Before we begin, I will acknowledge that we are gathered here on the homelands of the Yinabara people, and I pay my deep respects to the old people of this country whose spiritual presence and law and way of thinking and being is just as active and alive here today as it ever was, and we are absolutely the beneficiaries of that. And of course the custodians who have got an impossible job of walking in 2 worlds. I give my deep respects to the mob here. We're going to get into Julie's story, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Lydia. I'm from the Warramai Gumapingu clan group, Warramai Nation Gumapingu clan, which is just north of Newcastle, Saltwater River mob. And I've spent many, many years working in the arts as a singer-songwriter myself, but also a producer, so travelling our First Nations theatre all over the world. And I am filling in for Arnie Rhoda Roberts, who has held this space for many, many years, this particular event, and I won't even pretend to try to fill her shoes. They're big, big shoes to fill, but it's an honour to be here today. But the real reason we're here is to celebrate this wonderful storyteller, artist, cultural leader. And I'm going to ask Julie a lot of questions and we're going to get nice and deep, but thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. And traditionally, as an Indigenous person, when we travel into another territory, we always love to start with the fact that we come with just peace and friendship and love. We offer no harm. We want to just extend the hands of friendship, and there's different ceremonies that we would do back in Canada to one another just to ensure that they know we come with just good hearts and good intentions.
That's beautiful. I mean, you would have seen our welcome to country that has evolved from something that was probably more like a 3 or 4 day ceremony. And we do our best to, walk in this Western world as well. But yeah, thank you. So let's start. Can you tell us where you're from? I know it's the Mi'kmaq First Nations community. What's home like? And yeah, tell us what daily life is like back home.
Oh my goodness. I live on a little island off of Canada called Prince Edward Island. It was originally inhabited by us, and we called it Abagwit, which is cradle in the waves, because our island looks like a little crescent. And so we called it the cradle, the one that rocks our children to sleep. And then it got taken over by the French, and it became Ile Saint-Jean. And for a while, that was the name change. And then the British came, and they decided that wasn't a very good name. And they called it Prince Edward Island. And on our beautiful little island, we have magical spots that still exist in the real world. And a lot of people will say, why do you even go on vacation? Because you're 20 minutes from any beach. And on the south side of our island, it's all red sand and red clay and red cliffs with green on the top, with seagrass that grows everywhere. And on the north shore, you have the most beautiful white sands. And on the east and the west, you got a blending. So you have some little sprinkle of red and some little sprinkle of white. And the beauty is just breathtaking. And I had moved away for a little bit, but do you know when you move away from somewhere that connects to you deep inside, that it calls to you? It calls to you as you sleep, you dream about it. And I had to go back. I ended up having to go back just because my whole body knew that's where I belonged. And there are 2 First Nations that are both Mi'kmaq communities. And we live in EI, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland. It goes all the way up into Quebec and all the way down into the States. So we have to have some special treaties because our brothers and sisters and aunties and uncles live across the border. We did not have borders back then. We had our own sort of districts and areas, and so we had to get some special treaties put in place for us to be able to live and connect with our family across the border. And I am part of the larger community, and it is called Lennox Island First Nation. And our history, oh my goodness, this could take an hour if I started on that one. But it is beautiful, and it is amazing. And there are still a lot of, when Prince Edward Island was taken over by the British, they sectioned off all of our land into lots, and each of these lots was put in land lotteries. And they left absolutely no land for the indigenous people. We lived on the edges of farmers' fields. We lived in the woods that people didn't farm or work. We lived on the shores. And when you get winters like we get, we started to deplete in our population. And then finally, there was a community group in England called the Ladybird Society, and they bought us a little island off of PEI called Lennox, and it became our first home. And many of us still live there today. And back in the 40s and the 50s, we actually had to get a signature from the Indian agent to leave our community. If we wanted to go hunt or fish, we couldn't just walk out because we would be arrested. They didn't want us in general population. And so they made sure that we stayed where we were supposed to stay.
That is very similar to our experience here. A couple of things that you've said have sparked my thinking. One of them is here we have 500 different language groups and many different nations. I cannot imagine what that must be like crossing into a western border of another country. Like, we're just a massive island here. And I can't imagine what it would be like to have my brothers and sisters of my own nation separated by this new territory. That must be incredible, and I can't imagine the complexity that goes into the treaty process when you're dealing with 2 different governments, 2 different,
And that's when they recognize the treaties.
Yes. Yeah. That's the point, isn't it? Yeah. The other thing is, just the extraordinary similarities between us as First Nations people in Commonwealth countries. We also had to seek permission for everything, including going to funerals. Most of us, our communities, particularly here in Queensland, were moved onto missions. And if you wanted to visit other members of your family, if you wanted to attend a funeral, you had to seek permission from the governor at the time and wouldn't always get it. So every single part of life in Queensland, you were living under the Act, is how we would talk about it. And it's extraordinary when you connect with other First Nations mob and see our similar but such unique journeys as well. So, in terms of your life growing up, did you grow up on country, on Prince Edward?
Mostly in Prince Edward Island. I was born in the middle of winter in 1970 in my First Nations community. And we did not have a causeway that connected our little island to PEI. And so in February, it was pretty safe to be able to drive across the ice off the island and get to the mainland and then run to the hospital. But in the spring and the fall, we would lose 2 or 3 families a year going through the ice because they wouldn't see the darker, thinner ice. And children would go across to get flour and milk at the store, and sometimes they would fall through the ice. And finally, in 1973, they built us a causeway so that we would be connected to the mainland. And there is some actual amazing film documentaries like called the Snow Walk, and it talks about the trials and tribulations of the people who had to walk across the ice back then.
Wow,
But I
that's
was
incredible.
born there, and then my mother got very, very sick when I was 4. And we went to the doctors on PEI. They didn't know what it was causing it, so they sent us to the next door province, and they told her she had lymphatic cancer, and she had about a year. In 1970s, they were still, trying to figure out what all these things meant, so she passed away pretty much a year later, and my dad was devastated. He had a little girl, he had a house, he had a job, he had bills, and all of a sudden he's lost the person he was going to spend his whole life with. And then he decided, I'm going to become a minister, because you know what? I'm going to probably live to be an old man, and how am I going to get into heaven with all these years of being able to try not to do bad things? So I'm going to become a minister, and I'm going to go and I'm going to be with her in the afterlife. So he moved us to Ontario, and then he moved us to Manitoba. And then if anybody here knows anybody in clergy, every 2 years, you end up moving to a new church. So
I'm a priest.
So it's nothing is in stone. Like you move and you move and you move, and then he went from provincial to federal, so he became a prison chaplain.
Yep.
And that helped him when I was older, and he remarried when I was 13, which is probably really, really rough to have a teenage girl and a new wife. It was actually very, very rough. But we moved, and then finally the call of the island called me, and I knew it was time for me to come home, start a family, and do all those things that I had to get done. And I don't regret it. My father is still traveling the country, but I have been in the same house for 15 years, and knock on wood, I enjoy the stability.
My kids would have some good yarns with you, no doubt. We're in a bit of a different situation here, particularly as women have entered ministry and want some more stability for their children. So we are very lucky that in this diocese we get to stay in the one spot for not forever, but particularly while our kids are going through school and things like that. But I was just saying backstage to Sebastian, who's doing a bit of work here in this venue, it's more day to day. You'll get called in all different places, and it's wild.
We would be like getting ready to have supper, and a couple would need counseling, and all of a sudden it's like they're gone into the den, and I'm sitting there with my plate of food going, hello? Yeah. Hello? You know?
I can relate. I've done a few midnight trips to the hospital this week for last rites, and my family's always like, oh, did you go out last night? I'm like, yeah, it's all good. We don't need to talk about that. So in your growing up away from community but very connected, where did your sense of belonging come from?
My father was really, really good at keeping me connected to my mother's family. He would tell me stories that he remembered hearing, and every summer we would travel back to PEI, and I would get to see my older brother, my older sister, my grandparents, and I would stay connected and rooted to them. And that was truly a godsend, because it made me know who I was. Because living in Manitoba, I was in a different territory. Like, we had the Sioux, we had the Cree, we had the Ojibwe. Come on, they say, oh, hey, what are you doing here?
A long way from home.
Yeah.
That your dad spoke explicitly about, or was it something that was more kind of quietly absorbed through relationships?
It was more stories, which, of course, and you might even be able to attest to this, when my dad was being a minister, he had 3 churches. So we would get up at 7 a.m. in the morning, get there for 8:30 for his first service, and then 11 o'clock for his second service, and then 1:30 for his third service. And by the second one, I would sit in the front row and lip sync his service. And then he realized he needed to get me to do something else. So I became downstairs to keep them busy and entertained. And how I did that was a long time ago.
Wow, yeah.
You know, and it just, And I think that everything gives us a beautiful opportunity to become who we're going to be. Even if we don't know what we're going through is important, it all becomes these building blocks. Because my elders always say, your path is already written in the stars. We just have to be here and walk it. And I always think whatever is coming my way, try always to say yes. I am the one who, do you want to drive 5 hours and do something and do this? And I'll say, yeah.
Do you want to come to Australia to a
I
place
do,
called
yes.
Woodford in
And
the
I said,
middle of summer?
In the middle of summer. And they said, can you leave on Christmas Day? And I said, I will try. And it's his first Christmas, so I said, I will leave at like 4:30 in the morning on Boxing Day. I promise you. But I had to be there to see him try to open up his first gifts, and it was magic.
That's incredible. Yeah. So you're telling stories in a church context. Is there a moment where that storytelling shifted from something that you were expected to do, something you enjoyed doing, and to something that felt more like cultural responsibility?
That shift actually happened probably in my late 20s. And I was doing work for our Indigenous newspaper in PEI. And I was responsible for going out and getting the stories from our community. And we had like a 40-page paper that we put out every month. And so I would be that person at every event, the person that would tap you on the shoulder and say, do you have a minute? I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about this. And I'd be writing notes. And then I took the responsibility of that really great. Like I would stop in and let them read it before it went into print and make sure that I captured what they wanted to say. And then it became more and more that people would say, oh, you know a little bit about when we used to go seal hunting to get a little extra money. And so then they would say, can you come and do a 20-minute talk on the seal hunt? And I would take all these stories that the elders had told me, one of them being, I have to tell you this one, it's really short, but it's really cute. There was when they were getting ready to go down onto these ice floes, the captain would come down and say, if you slip and fall, it is more merciful for us to let you drown than to bring you back up into the boat and slowly freeze. So don't slip on the ice. And his eyes went right wide. I never slipped. And I was like, you're right, it's true.
Yeah. So you touched on it a little bit, but who were your first teachers, your first cultural teachers?
Well, my very first one, he basically wrapped his protective wings around me when I came back to PEI. And it was my mother's oldest brother, John Josark. And he actually ended up going to Rome and meeting the Pope when we were talking about the apologies. And he was so instrumental in researching Mi'kmaq. And he took me under his wing, heard his knowledge and his teachings. And when you get an advisor, a teacher, somebody to guide you who is up there. Now, Mi'kmaq government is traditionally, we had communities, and those communities were run by the chief. And then you have a few communities put together, and they create a district. And the district had captains. So they would be like a premier of a province. And then there would be a grand captain for all of Mi'kma'ki, and that would be like the prime minister. And then we had other nations in our territory as well. And so we had what we call the Wabanaki Confederacy, which is very similar to the UN. Now, my uncle was a captain of the Grand Council. So he sat and represented PEI in huge discussions about not just PEI, but our whole nation. And so he would learn from all of the elders that sat around that table, all the other captains, all the other district leaders. And he was my first teacher.
What a great first teacher. You went straight to the top.
Right to the top.
So you've worked across writing, performance, education, community leadership, poetry, all the things. When people ask you, what do you do? Out of all of that, is there one thing that comes first usually, or?
I do have a day job. Believe it or not, my 9 to 5, I am a knowledge keeper. And a knowledge keeper is really a practicing elder. I'm learning as much as I can so that when I become an elder, I am a good elder and I am able to share in a good way everything that I have learned. But a knowledge keeper is one who is getting to that point where they are getting closer to that age, but they're not quite there yet. And the elders are protective of that distinction, so they will let you know when you have crossed that finish line and you are now officially an elder.
Is it an age or a sense of being?
We actually have some young elders in our community that are just born with that wisdom and that knowledge, and they are respected by the community. And they always say the first step in being an elder is not identifying yourself as one. Like if you start going around saying, I'm an elder, you listen to me, then instantly you are not an elder in the eyes of the community. You have to just sort of jump into it as gently as you can and do the very, very best you can. So honestly,
follow the call, be
you
the
follow
servant.
the call.
One of my funniest memories of working in the Ananu-Pitjantjatjara, Yunkanjara lands, which is that massive space in the centre of the country, Central Desert. I was doing a program there with communities where language was kind of falling away a little bit, and they speak English as like a fifth language out there. And the way that they were trying to preserve and maintain language was to bring in a bunch of musos to write a whole bunch of reggae and country songs in language to keep the kids entertained and engaged. And I found myself in a beautiful community called Wateroo. And Wateroo had a population of 35. And the closest next town, which was Pitjantjatjara, had a population of 100, and that was the Big Smoke. And it was about a 4-hour drive through the middle of the bush. But when I got to Wateroo, I was quickly introduced to a young person in training to be a nunkari, which is a traditional healer. And they are identified at birth. And it was funny because I was in a classroom with kids from preschool to year 12. There was about 8 kids, all ages. And you could not do a single thing without the approval of Wayne. Wayne was probably about 10, but he was the boss. And so you'd be like, oh, I think we might go do some dancing. And you'd be like, Wayne, what do you think? And he'd either nod or be like this. And you had to quickly pivot. If Wayne wasn't into it, it was not going to happen because none of the other kids would do anything Wayne didn't want to do. But similar vibe, like, yeah, you're a knowledge keeper, you're moving towards your eldership. That could happen when you're 2 years old. It could happen at the end of your life. It's just a spiritual journey. So your day job is knowledge keeper. Out of all of the arts that you're engaged with, what sings to you? Where do you feel the most alive?
Oh my goodness. I think I have been a writer of books since I was about 10. The only thing I wanted for Christmas was that old Smith Cornea typewriter, the one with the corrector ribbon that you had to slide in and then back, and then type it again, and it made your letter disappear, and then you could retype it again. And that's all I wanted for Christmas. And I started writing. And then I started doing the newspaper writing, which is a whole different kind of writing, the who, what, where, why, how. And then I went from there to being asked to write 8 different poems about Mi'kmaq creation. And I said, okay. And I did some studying, I did some talking to elders, and I wrote these 8 poems. And then they became a play, which my kids wanted to be involved in. And then they said, well, you wrote these, why don't you continue to keep writing these plays? And then eventually, why don't you start acting in these plays? So then I became an actress. And then they go, we need music for these plays. So I started writing music. And then it just seemed like everything evolved and everything just grew. Like I said, if I hadn't been that lonely Mi'kmaq kid in Manitoba that didn't have any friends, I wouldn't have been writing, I wouldn't have been reading as much. So all these little things that help build you up, these building blocks that make you stronger and point you in the direction that you need to go. And so poetry is such a gentle, beautiful way to get one heartbeat close to another. And then music is another way to get in through the ears with sound, with that energy. And theater is a beautiful way with just actual your eyes. You're able to see the story come to life. So all of these ways of sharing our culture is so important. And if anybody said, well, what are you? What do you do? And I said, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up yet. It's coming. It's coming.
Do you still feel like that? You still feel like
I still feel like that because I know that since the horrible COVID word, we've been more into multimedia. So now I've been doing filmmaking. I produced my first little short film during the winter last year on diverse violence with a Mi'kmaq perspective. So I went to some elderly women, and talked about how domestic violence have impacted them. And then I went to some young women, and then I went to some two-spirited women and said, how is gender, violence impacting you? And I got enough funding to create a 15-minute film, and now I can use that film to hopefully go for at least an hour-long one, because our words are so important. And I find the older I get and the more elders that we lose, I think that we're losing so much of their information without being able to tap in and keep it,
Yeah, my husband's and his family is from the Torres Strait. We have two Indigenous populations in Australia as well, Aboriginal and Torres Strait, as well as the many nations within both of those. He's recording all these traditional dances and stories, but he's also found this incredible archival footage of the same dances from the 1800s. And so he's got a show going into the Biennale of Sydney next year where he's using both the old and the new, and it's just extraordinary, and it's such a powerful way of...
And it saves it for
the
generations to follow. They will have that.
They will have it. Yeah, and as much as he loves making films, that's the driving force is not that. The driving force is the maintenance and protection of culture and story. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. So if you were going to do a little bit of dreaming, I can imagine you getting that tap on the shoulder, and they're saying, it's time. The knowledge keeper phase is over.
Yes.
The elder phase is here. If you had to look back on everything that you've done, is there anything that you think would have most prepared you for that kind of cultural leadership?
In my own community, I feel that I am a useful resource for them. I'm also the one who goes around to everybody's house with a scanner and scans their old photo albums and gets them to identify the people before those names and those faces aren't connected anymore. So I have hard drives full of people's stories, and I give them digital copies of all their photo albums so they can send it to their grandchildren and their sisters and their brothers, and they can all share these digital pictures. And so I am the one who's sort of capturing those, and I'm the one who's capturing the stories. And so in the community that I'm in, I'm whether or depending, families sometimes don't get along, but it doesn't even matter because I'm a connector. I connect a lot of the old with the new, and that makes me very, very proud of the work that I'm doing. And then outside of my community, I think because I always tell people, if anything else, I am an inspiration because they look at me as this woman from Lennox Island who is suddenly the poet laureate of Prince Edward Island. And they're like, how on earth did you do that? And I said, you invited me and I showed up.
Yeah. You said yes.
And I said yes. Yeah. And I did the best I could with what I had for that moment. And every year I get stronger, and every year my voice gets a little louder and a little more passionate. And I know that they are starting to recognize it. I was invited to go to an award ceremony in the capital of Canada, and I got a meritorious service medal for my work in preserving the Mi'kmaq culture on PEI. And it's like, so I know that it's the work that I'm doing in terms of even working with their children in my theater group, writing down our teachings in stories and in poetry and in theater plays and making songs. All the work that I'm doing is driving me towards that, and one day it will come. And I know that I've put in the hard work, the elbow grease to ensure that, you know, once I get to there won't be people going, oh, no, she's not ready yet. It's like, yeah.
No one by them. It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Because you're going through the process of creating, of preserving culture, sharing culture, and with every single step along that journey, it becomes more and more embodied. And once that embodiment takes place, there's nothing that can move that mountain. It's such a solid foundation and such a solid rock. And yeah, what a journey. It's beautiful. You move across memoir, poetry, theatre. You've spoken about this. Children's books, performance with children, now film, multimedia. Why did you move between forms rather than just stay in one?
Well, just to explain a little bit about my thought process while I was writing my books, have you ever gone into your local bookstore and asked for an author? And they go, oh, that author, they're in the children's book section. And I thought, I want to do something even a little more. So I did a memoir, so I'm in the memoir section. I did a children's book, and that's in the children's section. I did a poetry book, and that's in the poetry section. I just finished a ghost story book. And you know what? It's not in any of the other sections. And so when you go to a bookstore and say, do you have a book by Julie Pellicer-Lush? They're going to point you to about 3 or 4, 5 or 6, because I have about 9 books out now, where you have to go through the bookstore to find it. And I just need to work on a sci-fi idea. And I am coming up with some really great ideas while I'm here. I'm taking the time just to think. And we have an old story about the creation of turtle. And it is a beautiful story. And then I thought, what if this turtle, who was once a man, has children? Would these children be able to go from turtle to man? Like, would they have that power, that super power? And what would they learn as they walked across this beautiful land? What would their adventures look like? I think that might be sci-fi.
It's a mythology, sci-fi.
Exactly. And my son, who is tracking very closely in my feet, he just released his first children's book, and he is like co-owner of our theater company with me, and he writes poetry, and he has 2 little babies, and he inspires me to keep wanting to grow, because he'll say, why don't we try this? And next thing you know, we're flying over to Dieppe, France to help the veterans, commemorate their fallen comrades on the beaches of Dieppe, France. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And so we bring our drums and our ceremonial tobacco and our sage, and we drum for these veterans who are now like 101, 102 years old. And it's just because you say yes. And so I'll never probably ever say no to an opportunity that will expand and grow this opportunity that comes to you.
To work so hard to get our voices and stories on any stage, any screen. Voices and stories on any stage, any screen. The first Indigenous theatre company, Nindathana, started in Sydney, and at that time they were literally bankrolling the next performance for the next week, and they were saying every week. And I was part of a wave, and within a very quick time frame, it went from that to the op space and a lot of support for First Nations work. But an interesting thing happened because you were traditionally in the arts limited by form, and we are not that. We're storytellers, first and foremost, across dance, across theatre, across music. So all of a sudden, the whole system had to wobble a little bit and figure out, how do we place these people? They do everything. But I think it lends itself to our way of thinking and being, a way that we are such an arts-based culture, such a storytelling culture. Yes. So you kind of started talking about the turtle story. Writing about family and lineage, it's also risky sometimes. How do you decide what belongs on the page, what belongs on the stage, and what doesn't?
My uncle this quite off my ear for that higher decision making, that because he has lived, he would always tell me the story about a tree that we have in PEI, and it's called running spruce. And traditionally, we would have harvested it and boiled it in a pot outside for a couple of hours and then let it cool down, and we would take the juice out and we would use it as a shampoo. And as we were doing our hair, what we found is that it would make our hair thicker and grow faster by using this running spruce. And the actual new name for it is hemlock. So you don't drink this shampoo. This is just for your hair. And our community members started talking about it. And next thing you know, cancer researchers were thinking about ways to help people